Oh, hello, this is Robert. This is the lesson for week beginning, well, what would have been the lesson on the 24th of March. I just want to go over the Piaget workbook I gave you, which is the thing on the right of the screen here, and just go through the questions on it and say a few things about it. I'll keep it really straightforward because you don't want to be sitting watching a video for ages, so we'll go through it fairly quickly. I recommend you read the workbook, make sure you can answer all the questions, and there's a Teams quiz on Piaget for you to do as well. So let's start with the workbook. So there's Piaget. So initially just basic questions about Piaget. Who was he? When was he born? Here we go. He was born in 1896. He's Swiss. His name's Jean, actually. For some reason I call him Carl there. Don't worry about that. Piaget thought that we're all pre-moral up to the age of 5. I asked you to think, do you think children are pre-moral? Freud did, as you know. We looked at some videos, didn't we, about whether we have innate morality, so I'd try and think about those, and you may think that we are actually moral before we're 5, and that would be a criticism of Piaget and of Freud. So have a think about that one. And then we come to Piaget's interesting ideas about what he calls, firstly, something he calls heteronymous morality. What age does a child go through that? Between 5 and 9. And what is it? Well, it's basically a reliance on authority figures and authority figures' rules, which it's kind of like Freud's conscience. You just rely on rules from authority figures. So that's fairly straightforward. This link here is a good one to read if you want to do some reading about Piaget, and I imagine some of you have looked at that and got the answers to these questions from that. I gave you a little couple of examples here of cases that Piaget looked at. In the heteronymous stage, apparently he thinks kids they judge morality simply by the consequences. So if Marie cuts a big hole in a dress, that's worse than Margaret cutting a small hole in a dress, even if Margaret intended to cut the hole. So it's pretty clear that in heteronymous morality is not that well developed. I mean, if you think that something's worse just because of its consequences, you're probably not fully developed morally, because you're not thinking of what people were intending to do, and that's what that illustrates. Piaget thought that children just judge the consequences of actions at this age, and so on that basis Marie would be naughtier than Margaret. And then you get what Piaget calls autonomous morality, which is interesting. This starts from about the age of 10, and at this stage Piaget thinks that children start to give up the authority figures a bit. They start to see the world from other people's point of view. They can understand intentions is affecting morality, and they start to see morality as having something to do with the group, particularly their own peer group, rather than just authority figures. Seems to be a bit of an advance over Freud, who seems to think we're stuck with the superego that we develop between the ages of about 3 and 6, and we never really get beyond it. Piaget doesn't think that. He thinks that there's definite moral development after the age of 10, and I think many of us would agree with that. That seems to make a lot of sense to us. So, and I want you to think about comparisons between Piaget and Freud. So, and in the PowerPoint, and you can get hold of this PowerPoint on Godalming Online. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll send you the link for it. I think I've already sent you the link for it, actually. So you can see their comparisons and differences. So if you look at that table, you can answer question 6. So there's obviously similarities between Freud's superego and Piaget's heteronymous morality, and there seem to be differences between Piaget's autonomous morality. Excuse me a second. Piaget's autonomous morality and Freud's superego. Autonomous morality seems a little bit more rational, less dependent on authority than Excuse me just a moment. A bit of a cough. Yeah, less dependent on authority than heteronymous morality and the superego. So it's quite interesting. And I said with all the people we look at, we're going to ask the same key questions. So if we do that with Piaget, what does he think the conscience is? Well, it's basically following rules. As a child, you just follow authority rules. But then as you get older, you start to make up your own rules based on you start to recognise people's points of view, and you're more interested in the group, and your rules tend to reflect that wider point of view. So you're not just following authoritative rules from authority figures. Next question, is it innate? No, Piaget doesn't think it's innate. He agrees with Freud in that. You may disagree with that, obviously, and that would be a criticism of Piaget. Is it rational? Now, I think the heteronymous stage, conscience isn't that rational, it's just following authority rules. But in the autonomous stage, maybe there's the beginning of rational moral thinking, slightly more sophisticated use of reason in morality, seeing things from other people's point of view, for example, and making up your own rules and recognising the importance of the group. So there's perhaps the beginnings of rational moral thinking, which is important and a difference from Freud. Do we do the right thing if we follow conscience, as far as Piaget is concerned? Well, in the heteronymous stage, we simply follow rules, so we may not do the right thing, and we could be like Marie, or we think, or we could think that Margaret is less naughty than Marie, which seems wrong. And if Marie intended to make a small hole, that's worse than Margaret, who accidentally makes a big hole. But in the autonomous stage, maybe we are starting to be a bit better at doing the right thing. We're less selfish, more interested in the group. We're not just following authority figures. But because Piaget is only studying people up to early teens, it probably is the case that the conscience hasn't fully developed by this stage. And so we'll go on and look at his student, Lawrence Kohlberg, next. And we'll look at him in the next video. And I'll send you some stuff on him to have a look at, that you can start looking at this week, actually. He sort of explores the development of morality in older people, adults, for example, and we see that the conscience perhaps does continue to develop through adulthood, which is what we'd probably expect. And Kohlberg's views are actually quite interesting, but that'll be the topic of the next video, so I'll stop here with this one. So things to do is make sure you've read through the workbook, answer the questions. You can look at the PowerPoint to help you with that. That's available on Godalming Online. You've got my note on Piaget. There's a Teams quiz on Piaget that I'd like you to do, so make sure you all do that. And also make sure you've done the Freud Teams quiz as well, and I will review those. So I'll stop now and I'll talk to you again later about Kohlberg. Thanks very much.